Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Ankita Kulkarni. She is shipping developer2leader.com. It's a great course, an online program that teaches everything that you need to build a high-performing team. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Scott?
I'm very happy to be chatting with you today. Thanks for spending time with me.
Yeah, likewise. I was very happy when you reached out. I was like, this is going to be a really good conversation. Being a listener on your podcast.
Oh, well, that's very nice. I appreciate that. So, how long have you been self-employed making courses on things like Next.js, JavaScript, and front-end development?
So I've been full time on this for like about 7 or 8 months so far. But I created a Next.js while I was working in my previous job because I wanted to test out. Do I want to create courses? Do I want to educate people? Is this something I want to do full time? Even though I like really love teaching and I've taught at a boot camp before and I've taught, given a lot of different conference talks. So I was like, this could be a good, challenge for me, and also the pandemic as well. So that was a really good time.
So it sounds like the universe conspired to push you in this direction to be a teacher.
Yes, 100%. I think it worked out really well because I really enjoyed creating the Next.js course. I grew to over 10,000 students, and I was like, this is working really well. And I was quite happy with it. I was happy answering all the questions and helping, I guess, educate developers and making complex topics really easy for them. And I was getting a lot of really good feedback. And personally, I think the main important thing is that you should also love what you're doing as well. And I think it sort of like reflects that on your, on whatever work you're doing and also in general. So I think like that is something that I really cared about. So I just decided to make the switch to being an educator. And yeah, it's been honestly I wake up every morning being very happy. So that's all I can say.
Well, waking up every morning and being happy, like that's the whole goal, right? Finding your thing and saying, I found my thing.
Exactly. And I think I have a very simple test in life. And I think this is something that I feel like everyone can benefit from. I really enjoy my morning coffee. Like I love coffee making and I really enjoy it. And if any time I realize that I don't enjoy my coffee in the morning, that's a sign that something is bothering me, that I'm stressed, or that's not something that should be happening in general. So I would also say like figure out what you really love doing, the simple things. And I feel like if you stop enjoying them, that's a sign that maybe you should explore and dig in there a little bit.
Have you always been that intentional? I talk about intentionality, mindfulness, and being present in the moment. Have you always been wired that way?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say more or less. I guess, growing up, you learn a lot of things. So I feel like mindfulness was definitely one of those things where I'm like, I need to be more intentional with whatever I'm doing. And always crave for, bring what brings you joy. Right. And I personally think that the money will follow because if you focus on what brings you joy, and that has been working really well throughout my career. So um, go for whatever you're passionate and be intentional about it. Yeah.
Now, one thing I want to point out, though, to your credit, was that you started with an internship at IBM and then quickly moved up the ranks to be a lead software developer at IBM, and then became a senior software developer. So, your trajectory, your career trajectory, if it were a graph, was very up and to the right, as the VCs say, and then from there, senior engineering manager, technical lead. But then you stopped. That it wasn't climbing the career ladder. Like you could go principal and staff and move your way up so quickly, but you chose not to.
Yeah, so it's actually quite interesting that you mentioned this because when I was working as a solution architect as well, which was kind of like a staff dev in the company that I was working at. And I was specializing at the time in like mobile development in general. But to answer your question like more directly as well, to me it felt like I was always going for the next title. I was always going for what's the next challenge? Oh, I did this. Amazing. I got, I got the appreciation. I was able to build, really good knowledge and in-depth expertise. That's awesome. I worked really hard for it as well. But then it felt like I was jumping from one goalpost to the other, and I never felt like there was any sort of an end. And that's when I realized, this is something that I shouldn't be doing. So one morning, not to be too philosophical here, but like one morning, or one evening, I should say, It was like 6 p.m. and I was still in meetings. And my dog came to me and being like, what the hell? We are 1 hour late to our daily walk. And I'm like, oh my God, I've been in meetings back to back from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I'm not even joking about it. So I'm like, this is not how I want to live my life. I want to live my life educating people. I want to do things that really bring me joy. And even though my previous job, it did bring me joy and it was really great, but I just felt like the me working from 8 to 6 back to back meetings is not something I want to do anymore. And that's why I just kind of like decided to switch to being an educator as well. And to be honest, it also came in full circle as well. When I was 21, created my own company, which helped local businesses build apps. And that's when I got my true taste of entrepreneurship as well. So I was able to grow and make it a really profitable business even though I did not have any business experience whatsoever, being a 21-year-old. But I did that. I was able to get a lot of different uh, contracts and work with a lot of different businesses, small businesses, because again, that was something that I was really passionate about in general. So that business experience is something that also really helped me when I've started my business. So it's honestly, I feel like it has come full circle in terms of, that as experience as well.
I was talking on a couple of podcast episodes ago about how I was trying to figure out what my job title was, and it's been engineer, it's been engineering manager, it's been program manager now. PM. Who knows what the P stands for? For some people, it's product. For some people, it's program.
Yeah.
But I always felt like I think I figured out that I'm a teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, why do I do the podcast? Like, you're episode 908, and
Mm-hmm.
people are like, "Why do you keep going?" It's like, well, I don't know how to stop. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
get the impression that you also don't know how to stop. You're always going to do this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's all about, in a way, this is also another goal, right? And another really fascinating and exciting goal that really brings me joy. And it's a journey that really I'm really enjoying in general. So yeah, I think this is, if I see myself like 10 or 20 years from now, and if I'm doing what I'm doing right now, I would still be very happy. So I think that's your answer,
Hmm.
right? So.
So this is a bit of a trick question. I'll put you on the spot here for a second.
Mm-hmm.
You were happy for a time being an engineering leader, but now
Mm-hmm.
you're teaching others to be engineering leaders. In your course, Developer to Leader, how will you make sure that the person who is going to become a leader will listen to themselves and be happy? Because you're basically teaching people to be in a role that you found happy making for a time, but then kind of
Mm-hmm.
fell out of love with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say like I did not necessarily fall out of love. It's just that I found a new passion. So I
Mm,
think I still love if you were to ask me to do my previous job or go back to it, I would still love that job. It's just that what is the kind of life I want to build for my future moving
mm,
forward. And I think that's the difference, but I still love it. So in the program that I created, Developer to Leader, I think you asked a really good question, which is that now that I'm not in the role anymore, how do I make sure that others are going to be happy or the challenges that they are facing as well, right? And I think the answer to that is community. I think any engineering leader or any developer or any engineer rather in general, I feel like you can always, you know, go through a bunch of courses, you can read a million books, but unless you get the practical experience of going through all the content, and if you don't have anyone by your side who's been there, done that sort of thing, then you are always going to struggle, no matter how many courses you take or how many ebooks you read or books you read in general. So I think with Developer to Leader, my plan was that I don't want leaders to feel lonely because I think the more you climb the ladder, it's lonely out there. And I can say that because you cannot necessarily talk the same things that you did when you were an engineer with your team anymore because you have to keep a lot of things confidential. So in that case, like I also have like a tight knit community attached to Developer to Leader, where you can ask questions. It's a safe space, and honestly, the people who have joined so far are the I feel I really love all of them. They are so hungry to learn. They want to grow together, and they're always asking a lot of questions and interesting questions. And I feel like if it's not me, that's totally okay that I cannot answer it, but I will help you and connect with others who can answer those questions if I don't have all the answers. So I feel like it's about, pulling from your experience, but also connecting and building a community together. And I think education is all about that, right? It doesn't matter leadership or development or which path you take. It's about building a community and helping foster that community, which is like really important.
It's cool that, there's a lot of folks out there that are just making PDFs and selling them for, here's a PDF, and then they email you the unlocked version of the PDF. But you're creating a community. You're making a space for people to have these conversations. They can have peer mentors. Like literally, it's one click off of your homepage, and I clicked one time, and it said, "Don't worry, you're not alone." Like
Mm-hmm.
you didn't hide that part. It was just like, oh, instructor, who is this community? Click, lift each other up. You're not alone. I thought that was really
Mm-hmm.
cool. That like spoke to me when I visited your site.
That's awesome. I'm really glad all the messaging is working, and I think it's because it comes from my experience as well, right? Like I felt lonely when I got into leadership because suddenly you were in a team and then you are a leader now. So how you cannot talk about the same topics anymore with your team. So I think it's all about managing that and learning what is something that you can and can't share and navigating around that. And now your peers on the at the same level as you, that is other managers are now your peers, right? So there are things like that that I think you can do to sort of lift each other up, and you don't have to feel alone if you don't have to. So yeah, I think community is a huge part of it, and I feel like it doesn't matter like what you're learning, doesn't matter which level you're at. Always join a community and always find people who are going through the same thing as you are. You will learn, and your growth will be 10 times faster, because that's how I did it as well. And I feel like maybe that explains the graph a little bit.
Yeah, I was trying to explain this to my 17-year-old that like a big part of life is just showing up, just being present.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be joining your community, going out into the world. Like I know that we're a virtual world right now. The pandemic messed up a lot of people, but whether you show up on a Discord or you show up at your local farmers market, be out there and see and be seen. Get energy and advice from other people, and you will grow faster.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think showing up, I think what you said is like really important here, right? Because if you can show up daily to help, your son or in general, grocery store or anyone in general who wants help, the people who are signing up for your courses, for whatever content you're creating, they're also going to show up for you because you're providing value to them. And I think that's like really important lesson right there.
So you built this with your 10 plus years of experience. I don't want to say any names. I'm not going to call anyone out, but you do know that there are people online, in my opinion, I think hopefully you'll agree, with virtually no experience that
Mm-hmm.
kind of come out and they're trying to sell you something, some new PDF, some new course, some new something, and then when you dig into their background, they have no experience building something.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this in the developer relations space that I'm currently working in. How important is it for someone to teach based on that lived experience? Like you needed that decade of engineering leadership before you could write this course, right? Or could you have
Mm-hmm.
written it without any of that experience?
Yeah, I think that I would say yes and no, right? Like, obviously, I feel like if I'm trying to sell something to you, I better back it up with, with good value, good customers, number of people that have tried. But it depends on if you're starting your journey or if you already have the experience. I don't want to discourage anyone being like, you cannot be a teacher or you cannot teach anyone if you are starting your career right now. That's
Hmm.
not true because you have those lived experiences which can become a teaching moment for people who are behind you, right? So I think it's important that, if I feel like you can always teach whatever your lived experiences are in general.
Hmm.
But I would say, like, because I have been working in industry, both in the IC path, I got really senior, but also in the engineering leadership path, I feel that becomes my unfair advantage.
Hmm.
That is my unfair advantage as an educator because I am able to bring both those perspectives, and because I have lived through that and I can help people navigate that as well and help, I guess, people level up in general, right? And because that's not something that we talk about a lot, but I think that really helps. So that sort of becomes my unfair advantage as an educator.
It sounds like a very fair advantage because you did the work, but I appreciate what you said and I agree with you. It's a very inclusive perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think in this case as well, like I think it's important that, you know, whether you want to teach today, without any experience or with any experience, I think what matters is that you figure out what makes you unique, right? What is something that you bring to the table that no one else does or very few people do, and I think use that to your advantage. And you won't know that right away, but it will take time. But as I have learned also running a business, but um, I would say like it does. You will get there for sure.
Yeah. Um, One of the things that I was interested in understanding more about is that there's being an engineering manager, and then there's being the most technical engineer on the team. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I think as developers think, I'm going to become a leader, they think that that means I'll become the most technical developer, and then they'll do what I say. But
Mm-hmm.
your perspective is more strategic and more visionary from looking at your course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say like it's a bit of both as well. The reason why I'm saying it's like yes, it helps you become a really strong engineering leader, and if you can be a staff developer or you can be a senior developer who wants that engineering leadership skills, because a lot of the course covers what it means to be a good leader. Because I think if you know that, then you will know how the management aspects of it as well. So I cover both in terms of the engineering management truly, but also like engineering leadership in general. And I think that's why I call it developer to leader, because it helps you get that transition from being a developer and what it takes to being an engineering leader in general. Now, be it manager or not, it's totally up to you if you want to take that path or not. But there's a course for you if you're willing to learn.
Yeah. I have found in working with some leaders, both at my company at Microsoft that I'm at right now, and then at companies I was at before, that sometimes developers fall into leadership because someone says, "You seem good. Maybe you'll be the boss." But there's no formal training. There is no course to teach someone
Mm-hmm.
how to be a leader. They're either naturally a leader or they're not. But you
Yeah.
believe that you can be taught to be a good leader.
100%. I feel like it's a skill set. I think a lot of people think that leadership, you're a born leader. You learn leadership skills, as you're suddenly a teenager or you suddenly get into school and you are a brand new leader. I don't think it's that way at all. I think it's a skill set that you need to develop. It's a skill set that you need to truly learn. So I think it's important that, you gain that leadership experience by trying out a bunch of things, right? Like taking on projects, or just like leading in a smaller capacity, working with your manager in terms of how you want to lead, or how you want to even like maybe lead a specific meeting first and then slowly move on to a project. But I would also say like it's kind of like a pendulum, right? Like you can either like go from, you can be individual contributor, and then suddenly you're like, everyone is just like, oh, you need to be a leader or you have really good leadership skills, and then you go try that out, you try management or you try some sort of leadership capacity, and then it's like, you know what, this is not something that I want. I really enjoyed it, I learned a lot, but you can sort of go back. And I think a lot of people just think that it is not possible to go back, and I think that's not true at all. It's, you can totally go back. In fact, you will build more empathy and will have built a new skill set that you did not have before because you made the transition earlier. So truly it's not like career transition, it's just like a pendulum. Try both roles, see where you feel like which company where you can bring the most value, and if it's leadership, then go take that position. But if it's being an IC and being senior most person in the team or whatever that might be, then you can take that as well.
Yeah, I wonder why sometimes people think that it's a only going up and to the right, and then if you go back to being an engineer, that is sliding backwards, and it's not. I like your pendulum analogy. One side of the pendulum isn't better than the other side.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that people might think because they might think that it's a demotion or some
Right.
sort, but I
Yeah.
don't think it's that at all. I feel like typically you would think that when you're growing dev, right? You always want to go upwards, and you always think you have to get to a specific position like senior developer to get into management. And a lot of companies might not have a well established IC track as they do a management track, so it might give the illusion that, oh, management track is somehow better. But I don't think that's true at all. I think you should find a company that has both those tracks so you can sort of like cherish whatever skill set you want to embody more, right?
Yeah. I think sometimes companies make it look like the only way to go up is to be turned into leadership. Like, I hit the glass ceiling. Now it's management and I have to give up all the fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, like when I was helping before I launching developer to leader, I created like a mini like document as I was helping someone in the previous company transition into engineering management from a senior developer. And as I was talking to them, I kind of helped them, navigate that, and whatever questions that they asked me, started documenting them, which I added my experience on top, which evolved into developer to leader. But I told them the first thing when they transitioned or when they were transitioning, you can always go back. If you hate it, you can tell me now. You don't have to suffer. I can manage all the expectations. So moving forward, I started saying, like being his manager, I started sharing that, hey, like, this person wants to try it out and see how it works out, see how this role would work, and then sort of go back, which again, like helps with the pendulum, right? Otherwise, you don't, it doesn't need to feel like this is a permanent move. It's not. It's a temporary move for a few years.
That's a very empathetic perspective. And I am finding in my interactions, both with my growing kids and with people in the community, that some people seem to come wired with empathy towards others,
Hmm.
while others have a more pessimistic perspective on the world. And there's always these. There's two kinds of people in the world, but
Yeah.
you can pick any two sides and say there's two kinds of people. But in the strange time that we're in right now, it feels like empathy and a lack of empathy is the thing that is missing. And I'm hearing in everything that you're describing that you're putting empathy first as you grow people into being leaders.
100%. And I think I learned empathy very early on in my career. I'm not sure. I guess I was like working with the design team more, creating workshops and things like that. And I think we would do empathy mapping or things like that, thinking from a user's perspective and building apps in their shoes and not apps or features that we want to build. And I think that also helped, build that foundation and understanding as well. But I think like you said, right, like I think there are two sides. You can have empathy or you can. I think that's, I feel like people who say that, I feel like they don't know necessarily, they might not know what empathy might be, so I feel like you can always learn how to be empathetic. You can always learn how to how to reflect back on your previous experiences and realize what is empathy and what isn't, right? Were you empathetic in that situation? Or if someone gives you feedback or tells you that you haven't thought from my perspective, that is, there you go, like that is empathy 101 right there.
Yeah,
So you can always build empathy in general, and I think it's a very important skill as we build features, products for our users in general, but also human connections as well.
I want to call out something that folks who are listening may have heard you say, but they may not be familiar with what it is. An empathy map. This is an
Hmm.
actual thing. This isn't just a buzzword that you just made up. It's an actual thing that is applied. It's like it's user experience 101, isn't it?
Hmm.
It's a sometimes people will do it as a quadrants, like what does the user say, what does the user think, what does the user feel, what do they do. That tool is super helpful, not just in user experience, but in life.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you explained it very well. I think having those quadrants and like going through that exercise of like what is that person thinking, what do they really want, what assumptions do I have, right, about this specific user or product, will play a huge role. And I think the designers, they do a really good job at that, in general, like creating these workshops and whatnot. And I feel like I just learned from them.
That's great. One other thing that I want to call out that I was surprised about was in your ebook, the Engineering Leaders Playbook, which is one of the pieces that one gets when they get access to the course or that you can buy separately. You have a whole section on building credibility, and it came very
Hmm.
early. It's like chapter 3. So it's like, you're like talking about accelerating learning, and then you have a whole section on early wins and credibility. Why is credibility so important, and why is it more than just a popularity contest? Because sometimes people think, oh, so and so only got promoted because of popularity. And I want to juxtapose the difference between being popular and being credible.
That's a really good question. I think what's important is to know is that trust is the foundation to all relationships, no matter what. And I think that if people can trust you, that you can deliver any sort of project, you can get it done. Doesn't matter what problems or situations we face. I think that really helps a lot. So I think like credibility is part of that. What are things that you could do to establish that trust very early on in your team, in your career? This way you don't have to go through the misunderstandings that come later down the road. Very early on you show that, hey, I truly deserve to be here. I got hired for a reason and I want to help you. Please tell me how I can help you. And I think when you take that approach and like build those early wins, and again, wins don't need to be some massive wins. You don't have to make $1 million for the company in your first week, although that doesn't hurt. But I'm just saying, like, build those small wins and they stack up, and that will really help you build that credibility with your team. And once they start trusting you, there you go. I think that's a really key important factor in like any job you join. So like build those early wins, build that credibility, and make sure that you are able to build that trust. Once you have trust, then we are humans after all. So that's what's really important.
Yeah, I like to think about credibility and trust in a very simple terms. I think if I ask someone to do something and they did it, wow, that's a point, right? I mean, like I'm not keeping
Exactly.
score, but there are friends, there are people that I've known for 6 months and there's people I've known for 20 years, but they build credibility in my head with the like, oh, when I call Ankita, she's going to get it done. So then
Mm-hmm.
I want to work with you again because I'm like, this is a credible person. When she says something's going to get done, it's going to get done. So I'll call a friend, even if a friend I haven't seen in a long time, but we had wins together. Say, hey, I have an idea. Let's do it. And they're like, yes, I'm in, and we know it's going to be great because it's like a group project in school, in college, or in,
Yeah,
and you're like, oh, this was a great group. Everybody said they were going to do a thing and they did the thing. But the worst thing you can do to lose credibility is to say you're going to do something and then never gets done.
exactly. And I think I also like to relate it to like someone invites you to a party, right? If you say you're going to go, unless obviously you have reasons, right? if you if you get invited and if you say you're gonna go, you're gonna say you're gonna bring these things. Just show up to the party. You don't need to do anything. So I think it's as simple as that, like going back to school as well, right? And I think it's like, even lately, like I like to party a lot, but anyway.
But to the point
um
about showing up, you said earlier, like it's about showing
yeah,
up. If you get
exactly.
invited 10 times and you never go, then why are we inviting you?
Yeah, exactly. Because then you're sending some other signal that maybe you're not interested. And I think same applies in our work culture as well, right? If someone is asking you to do something, just be honest that you cannot do something. They will respect that more. But if you say that you will do it, but then you don't end up doing it, obviously you need to be transparent. If you were, then again, brownie points for you. But if not, then just let them know, right? But if you're unable to achieve the task, then I think that takes away your points for being a credible source, and that slowly, the trust starts chipping away, which is not something that you want in general.
Which is really an excellent segue into the next chapter in this particular playbook, which is the Engineering Leaders Playbook, the first 90 days, where you set expectations. People I don't think people are taught to set expectations, but
Mm-hmm.
unspoken expectations breed resentment.
Mm-hmm.
If someone has an expectation for you to do a thing and you don't talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to fail and not even know. And they're going to
Mm-hmm.
resent you and you're not going to know why. And it was never spoken. And that's why in my engineering teams, we have writing things down culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you said you were going to meet this date. Where's the email? Where's the document? Where's the schedule? No one ever said that. If you write it
Mm-hmm.
down, everyone gets clarity. So setting
Mm-hmm.
expectations is so important.
100%. And I think that if you, just like we talked about a minute ago, let them know if you're unable to get something done. That is setting expectation. If you say that you will get it done, that is setting expectation as well. So make sure that you are communicating that and like letting people know what is your, true state. Be honest about it, right? But again, as a leader, that changes things a little bit. If someone in your team doesn't do something, I would take full accountability as a leader, because I feel that it's really, really important. And it's a very simple test. If things don't get done, and that means you haven't communicated really well, right? that there's some miscommunication and you need to figure out what it is. And recently I actually finished a chapter on expectations in general in the developer to leader, and I think that's what's like really important there, which is that make sure that your team knows how should they communicate with you, how often should they communicate. And there are so many, like million things that you can do on just like setting expectations. And there are those little things, right? Like, when can I hear back from you? Oh, tomorrow. Perfect. So things like that I think really helps in like setting expectations in general.
That's a great point. And I really like that you're ending our conversation about the fact that the buck does stop here. You, as the leader, will take responsibility for your team's work. You'll support them. You'll never throw them under the bus. That's definitely an engineering leader in my book.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's really important that you take full accountability. And I think what's really important is that we are all going to make mistakes. I think it's what matters is that what we do after, right? Like, how do we help each other out? And what do we do once we make those mistakes? I think that's the important key here as well.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me as well. I also wanted to share that I've also created like a special link for the podcast as well, which
Oh,
I'll
cool.
share with you after. But like, it's going to be on my website, kulkarniankita.com/podcast/Hanselman, I believe.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll put that a link in the show notes. So if folks are
Awesome.
listening, visit the page. It'll be at the bottom.
Exactly. This will just include all the entire conversation links and things like that. This way, it's like really helpful for folks as they are listening. They can like click around, and empathy mapping is like one of those links that I'm going to add as well.
Very cool. I appreciate that. So you can check out Ankita at developertoleader.com and learn more about this course. And thanks so much for chatting with me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.